There are currently 12 maps in Star Wars Battlefront 2, and inside those maps, there are even more phases. Today, we're counting down the top 5 worst phases to play as attack in Star Wars Battlefront 2. Welcome back, and today we're going to go over the top 5 worst phases in Star Wars Battlefront 2. Even though these phases are by far my least favorite to play, overall I do like the maps in this game. Some of them have their flaws, but when we come down to it, there is only one map that I really hate to play. For this list, I only allowed myself to pick one phase from a map, so this isn't going to be an I Hate Kashyyyk video, since I could only pick one of the phases. This list is just my personal list, and some of you may disagree, but if you do, let me know in the comments which one you disagree with and which phase you would have take its place. Remember that these are just the attacking phases, we have another list for defense. If you enjoy this video, there are several ways you can support this channel. You can like, share, comment, subscribe, and we're also on Patreon. We have new videos every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and streams on Tuesdays, Thursdays at 8 p.m. Central. If you're on the PlayStation 4, come join the Greeny Weenie Brigade, it's a ton of fun. Also, check our partners at StarWarsGaming.net. They posted an article about DICE wanting our feedback, so follow the link in the description down below to find out how you can give your feedback on Star Wars Battlefront 2 so we can make this game great together. Let us get into the list of the worst attacking phases in Star Wars Battlefront 2. At number 5, we have Phase 1 in Takodana. In this phase, the First Order is fighting an uphill battle, literally. This one usually ends up one of two ways. Either the First Order just rolls the resistance and takes the hill super fast, or most likely, the First Order is pushed back into their spawn and camped harder than Yoda on Dagobah. Once the First Order is pushed back, there's really no getting out of it, since there are only 3 routes to get up the hill, but when it comes down to it, the resistance only needs to hold 2 of those 3. If they hold the main hill that the First Order spawns on and the right hand side of that hill, they have already won that phase. If the First Order manages to get the hill, this map in my experience ends in a First Order victory. There has been a change since the release to try to help alleviate this, and that's giving AT-STs to the First Order. These become available at 60 reinforcements left. The drivers of the AT-STs do not push far enough forward to actually help, and if they do, they're normally melted pretty quickly since they have 0 infantry support since the infantry can't get away from the spawn. For number 4, we have Phase 2 of Kashyyyk. This was a toss-up between Phase 1 and Phase 2. However, I chose Phase 2 on Kashyyyk since it's 2 very small rooms with a total of 4 doors to get inside. Once you manage to get inside, it just turns into even more choke points, and you'll need to place a bomb and hold it. It's not so much that this one is hard to attack. A lot of times the droids are able to push through Phase 2 and onto Phase 3. It's just that this phase is super bland and very boring in comparison to the other maps and objective areas in this game. The area in between the 2 objective points never sees any fighting whatsoever, since it's just an open field and there's no incentive for clones to push into it. Since there's no objective there, there's also no point for droids to be there either, leaving this phase only having 2 lanes of the 3 actually being used. The only time you'll ever see anyone running across the middle of this area is when they're trying to get from one objective point to the next. Number 3 is Phase 2 of Naboo. Naboo is probably my favorite prequel map. In Phase 1 I find a ton of fun, and I love the cityscape. Especially from the dusk time of day, it looks amazing. But once Phase 1 is done, we get into Phase 2, with 3 choke points and nothing happening. Most of the time, the droids come to a grinding halt and just stand in the doorway firing down the hallway. You can easily run in to get to the objectives, and I do it every single time I play this map, but when no one comes with you, it doesn't last too long. Most of the time, the droids end up with Bosk or the Emperor as a hero, and neither one of them will ever push in to help the droids advance, especially since the clones normally end up getting Rey and Yoda, which are able to hold choke points super well. If you end up on Naboo Phase 2, try leading the charge and rush in as soon as the phase begins. You'll be surprised how quick and easy you can get into the objective rooms. If you manage to bring some people with you, you can avoid this stalemate altogether and take the objectives very quickly. One way I would recommend alleviating this, and I don't think it'll ever happen, is move the 2 objective points farther back towards Phase 3 into the rooms that have the staircases leading up to the main throne room. Those rooms are a little bit larger and would allow for much more fun engagements, since from there you have 3 doors to get into each room, and you could also use the middle as well. Granted, it would still have the choke points, but there'd be a few more doorways you could push in, allowing flanking to happen. The second worst phase goes to Phase 3 of Jakku. Overall, I really enjoy Jakku. Phase 1 is great, Phase 2 is a lot of fun, and Phase 4, if you make it there, is a blast. Get it? Because it's the blast map. But Phase 3 is just horrible. The layout is fine, but the secure the 2 objectives are poorly placed. Actually, just one of them is poorly placed, and it's the one on the left hand side if you're the First Order. This area only has 2 entrances that can be locked down super easy by the resistance. The First Order generally loses all sight of the objectives in this phase and fight up the middle of the map because, you know, reasons. I really can't figure out why most people fight in the middle of the map on this one, and if you don't get the left objective first, this match ends in a resistance win. When the DC-15 was glitched, it was even worse, but even without the glitch, Rey can hold a point all by herself. And the right hand side is much easier to get and should always be gotten second. I definitely recommend, if you're on Jakku Phase 3, that the First Order pushes left with everything they have, in order to get this point quickly. That way you can avoid this long fight to try to secure it, which would allow you to get to Phase 4 a lot quicker. Before we get into the worst phase, here are some of the runner-ups that didn't make the list. Phase 1 Death Star for the Rebels is just annoying, especially since it gets pushed back into the spawn a lot. Phase 1 of Kashyyyk, again, I really hate Kashyyyk. Phase 3 of Naboo, it's just a giant room with, again, 3 choke points that are easy to hold for the clones and usually goes into a super long overtime. And then Phase 3 of Tatooine. While I love Tatooine, and it's probably my second favorite map, only after Yavin, Phase 3 turns into another choke point fest, where usually it just ends up getting very bland very quickly. All of these phases come to grinding halts, but overall, most of them are more enjoyable than our number 1 pick or any other pick on this list, which brings us to the absolute phase in Star Wars Battlefront 2, and that's Phase 4 of Kamino. Yes, there are 4 phases to Kamino. You probably didn't know that because it usually ends with Phase 3, mainly because you used all of your reinforcements taking Phase 1, and then again taking the west landing pad in Phase 2, only to get locked out of the barracks in Phase 3. But if the droids manage to take Phase 3, you move on to the longest 2 hallways leading into the exact same room to do a repeat of the Phase 1 objective. I don't play this phase enough. I honestly can't find any footage of it, so here's a rough drawing of what it looks like. There's basically 2 long hallways, which are just giant choke points, leading into 1 circular room, with everyone standing at either end of the hall just shooting at each other and no one moving forward. This is very hard to take, and usually ends in a clone win, with the droids just getting locked down right outside of the room, with the heroes not being able to push up to clear out the enemy, locking them down with just constant fire. This is probably the worst design I have seen in a game in a long time, and that's why it takes the cake for the worst phase in Star Wars Battlefront 2. Thank you all for watching this video, and let me know in the comments which phases you hate playing attack on, and I'll see you in-game.
What the hell? A280's great. The A280 CFE is so good.
Holy. Good, I'm glad whoever shot that guy. He spawned me right in front of him.
Somebody's spamming that door. I can't get out.